Hi guys, it's Blackie and welcome back for another episode of Percussion Revolver Series. Okay, today I'm going to be doing 2 for 1. Those that have signed up for my online percussion revolver class will be getting the full-length video of this, where I'm going to go more in depth on conicals. Those in my regular channel are going to be getting the second half of the video, which is me shooting and doing the review of the Arrows Gone Bullet Mold's Kerr bullet. Now let me give you a quick background on the Kerr bullet for just a second. The Kerr was a British revolver, percussion revolver, and at the beginning of the Civil War a lot of them had been imported into the U.S., mostly into the South, but had been imported into the U.S. And this bullet was fairly common in those days. Now why we're interested in it in our modern times is where the bullet sits in, as opposed to like a Johnson & Dow which sits higher. This fits into the tight openings of the loading frames much better, especially in the 44 caliber 51 Navies, which don't have that big of an opening. And when you try to put a conical in, there ain't enough room. You got to waller out a lot to make it fit, if not the rammer is actually sticking down too far. But with a Kerr bullet, it will drop in and fit. So, does the Kerr bullet give us any advantages? Yeah, it does. Just from looking at it and just from piecing together through it, one of the things about conicals is how they balance, okay? You want a weight forward balance, and the Johnson & Dow shoots very, very well, but it really has its weight almost in the midpoint, whereas the Kerr bullet has weight forward. Think like a badminton shuttlecock, where the wind pressure is going to line up the back end, and I'm betting that's going to make it a little more accurate. And I'm thinking of a hunting round. Now the Kerr bullet is 225 grains. It is a 457 outside diameter, but you're going to neck that down to whatever your chamber is. So let's say it's going to be at the minimum a 451 at 230. Does that sound familiar? Well, let's see. 451, 230 grain, 5 grains more than this, moving at 800 feet per second. We call that 45 ACP, which has been a proven man stopper for well over 100 years. So for an up-close hog hitter or something like that, 0 to 25 yards, where you can place your bullet well, that might be an option for a hunting bullet. See? And so that's where we're going with this. So let me set up and we'll start shooting, and we're going to see how this groups out of my Uberti fluted cylinder 1860 Army. See, sometimes call them a color Colt, and we'll just see how this does. Let me get set up. Okay guys, the load will be 25 grains of 3F GoX powder, and I got that load from the Arrows Gone Bullet Mold's video where they were talking about that was the service load for these was 25 grains. So we're going to start with that and see what we get. Okay, so it's going to be 25 grains of 3F powder, the 225 grain Kerr bullet, and a Remington number 10 cap. Let me get loaded and we'll see how she groups. Okay, we are now loaded up and we're at a distance of 10 yards. I will be aiming dead center of the target. Now this gun has been sighted in previously, and I've dialed it in for round ball. And I have shot Johnson & Dow in this gun and been very pleased with the results. So I'm interested in see what this Kerr bullet was going to do. So remember, it's going to be slow fire and see how I can best group it. So let's see. Turn around where you can see me and the target. Right down there. And let's see what we can do. Don't laugh. that's pretty good considering I'm old, blind, and shaking like a leaf. Let's go take a look. Okay, my first shot was here, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I believe that was my last one. Now that vertical, now my windage left to right is good. I'm right in the zone right there. That group is still not a bad group at all, but I'm going to tell you those two right there are probably because of loading pressure. I don't have my rammer marked for this, and what that is when you come down and your rammer goes beyond a certain depth, I have a line that tells me when the round ball is seated flush, so I'm using full charges. I don't have a mark for showing this. If this turns out to be the most accurate, I will put a mark there so that when I get there I know I'm exactly the same all the way across. And so there's some variances in pressure, and 25 grains is pretty much a full load because it's, I feel it compress it that last little inch, which means I'm base to bullet, fully chambered. So about in my Uberti 1860 Army, we're looking at 25 grains is probably going to be a full load. You might be able to milk in just a little bit more, but I doubt it. It wouldn't help you any. But that's pretty good for never fired it before like that, to be in that kind of group, especially since I was aiming here. And that's all can easily be covered with the palm of a hand. Well, that's minute a hog out to 25 yards. And when I say minute a hog, minute a deer, that means that the vitals is the size of a paper plate. So if I could keep everything in that, knowing it's just a grunt high, instead of aiming here, if I'd aimed there, it would all been in here. Now I'm going to reload, and this time I'm going to aim, say, at this point right here, and see if it doesn't put it in the zone like that. But that should do it. So thus far, what I think about the Kerr bullet, outstanding. Let me see how my second group goes. Now, what will I do between shots? Now that I've fired a full 6, I will take my bore brush, I will dunk it into a little bit of gun butter, and I'll run up and down the bore a couple times to make sure that all the fouling is soft and nice and slick, so the next round coming down doesn't hit any hard spots to ruin my accuracy. This time I'll be very particular about how I load it exactly. And let's see what it does. I'll be back with you in just a minute. Okay, I want to talk about that conical loading just a second. With the Kerr bullet, I've already put powder, double check. Okay, this cylinder right here. Watch how easy this is. You drop it like that and it goes bump. Plenty of room. See, look, I have plenty of room underneath for the rammer. The center of the shaft is further up as opposed to a Johnson & Dow, which sits a lot taller. So if you're looking for a conical that you want to use in just about all of it, I'm beginning to think I'm going to have to have me a mold. Someone was kind enough to send me a supply of 30 of these rounds to try out. And from what I've seen thus far, yeah, Blackie's got to have a mold. So I'm going to have to contact Arizona and get me a mold. Okay, second set. This time I was very careful at my loading, and I'm going to be aiming at that lower point. Remember, I pointed out. That's where I'm going to be aiming at to see if I can group it a little better. Let's try. Okay. Not too bad for a blind old coot. Let's see. I'll take that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right there, all in the orange. Yeah, I'll take that. This Uberti, the 1860 really likes that Kerr bullet, and I thought it would. Again, my load was 25 grains of 3F black powder, no wad. I put the conical on top and rammed it. I did not lube the conical. When I get my own mold and I make them, I always run mine through some liquid Alox to coat the bullet. I will be doing that on mine, but I make sure the bore is lubed. So after I'd done that 6, because you're using such a heavy load, you're going to produce a lot of fouling, right? I pulled her apart. I ran a greased brush up and down both sides, ran a patch through one time, looked through, made sure I had plenty of lube in the bore and it was clear, and I reloaded. That was it. For hunting, that'd be easily maintainable. And if it'll keep everything into that, say 2.5, 3 inch circle right there, yeah, I'll be able to keep it on a paper plate out to 25 yards for hog hunting. Now my point of impact, my point of aim was right here, which means excuse me, get you down where you can see where my finger's pointing. My point of aim was right here at the top of that post. So that means she's shooting about 2.5, 3 inches high. That's fine. Heavier goes higher, usually anyway. And I can easily compensate from that just by Kentucky windage, dropping it down just a grunt. But that means that is now a hog killer possible out to 0 to 25 yards. And so therefore, when I'm going to be in the stand looking for hogs or carrying it on my hip as a backup to deer hunting, that is no slouch. And I can use that for coup de grace, and I can also use that for shooting hog. So that's where I'm going with. So my thoughts on the Kerr bullet, yeah. Do I like it better than the Johnson & Dow? To be honest, at this moment, I'm going to say yes. I like the Johnson & Dow. I really do like it. I got a mold for it. And I've shot that 1860 out to 100 yards on a steel gong with it and really liked it. But I'm going to tell you, right now, out of the box, with only 12 rounds, it's outperforming in accuracy what I was getting out of my Johnson & Dow. So if you're looking for an accurate conical to use for long range work or whatever, I'm going to recommend that Kerr over that Johnson & Dow. Even though I love that Johnson & Dow, I think this Kerr is going to be a better choice. Okay, for you that are in my percussion revolver online class, now the video will shift over to talking about conicals. Okay, this is not what my regular channel got. My regular channel got the shooting video that you'll probably see immediately after this. But you're going to get the conical discussion and why conicals can be a big deal, especially turning a cap and ball revolver into a more effective hunting tool. Okay. Now this group that I've just shot right here was with that Kerr bullet. And the Kerr bullet loads easier. Now, whenever I was starting out shooting in cap and ball revolver, everybody talked about, can I get a conical? Can I get a conical? And to my knowledge, the only bullets that were available in conical were the little brass copies of the Colt mold, which did not make a proper size conical. Due to the difference in manufacturing between original guns and Ubertis and Piettas in the Italian manufacturer, they had taken an original mold and copied it. But as you may be aware, when I take this full size and I make a copy of it, I actually make a slightly, we're talking about thousandths of an inch, smaller, because I have to use this as the base to make that, and you lose a little in the casting process because I use this to make the mold, and so it makes this a little bit under. So for example, let's say a Colt 36, which was originally like 381, let's say, comes out 379. Now I'm just making up numbers up so you get my idea. The bullet it would then cast would be a 379, slightly smaller. But then you go to our modern bore, which was a little bit bigger than the original bore by 1 or 2 thousandths. So instead of a 449, it was a 450 bore in a 45, or that way a 451 round ball would swedge into it and come down the barrel at 449 or 448. If you've got a bullet that's coming out at a 449, when you go to swedge it, it's kind of undersized a little bit, and it didn't grip the rifling well, and it wasn't that accurate. Lee came out, it was the first company that I can remember that came out with a modern conical. And although it was sometimes called a ballistics, it really wasn't that accurate. They would load, yeah, they hit harder, but they had missed something in the technology, okay? Back in the day when these were military weapons, what the conical was used for was long-range penetration. A spear point bullet penetrated better than a round-nosed round ball. Now the round ball made a more devastating wound actually at close range, but the conical penetrated better. And when you're shooting massed groups of troops, remember these guys would line up shoulder to shoulder in a line to shoot at you. The idea of a bullet penetrating was more important, because if I hit onto guy A, it might penetrate and hit guy B behind him as well. Plunging fire was the mind of it. And that's what they talked about with their guns, was this plunging fire, so that when it hit a little high, they wanted it to shoot a little bit high. So it hit higher up in the front row, heads and upper torso. If it missed, it would be dropping. The guys in the back row would be hitting about the waist, see? And so you kept the bullet in the vital area the longest. And so that's the reason they wanted in a conical. They wanted that. So when we went to making them in modern times, we're kind of missing the mark, okay? Now that has changed because modern technology and cowboy action, where you needed accuracy. You're not just going out there to look cool and make noise. You're actually trying to win matches. And so if you haven't got something that's going to be accurate, forget it. And so the accuracy of the percussion revolvers has light years, guys. I mean, it's shocking to me how accurate they have become. When I was starting out in the 70s, the 25-yard target for pistol was the size of this. That was the target. And the scoring ring was this big, and this big ring right here was like the 10X. It was the size of a coffee can on the bottom. And I watched guys work like everything, sweat and blood, and they might, out of a possible 60 points, 10 points per hit for 6 shots, they were turned in scores in the low 40s and winning matches. That wouldn't even, you'd be laughed off the range today. And so a conical in modern time has to do better. Well, what Mark Hubbs of Era's Gone Bullet Mold did was he went and looked at the original and then had them correctly made. He had Lee make molds that duplicated the old original, okay? Didn't lose anything. It gave us a full-size bullet. And so the Johnson & Dow, the Richmond in a 36, the Colts that he has, and the Kerr bullet are actually more correct and actually fit our bores better, and you get better accuracy out of them. Now I've just shot this target with that Kerr bullet at a range of 10 yards from a rest with 25 grains. It's a full load, no load workup. I've never fired this load before, and yet out of my gun, which is a 1860 Uberti, I got that. Yes, Blackie will be getting a mold for this and then do load development for it. But for a hunting round, when you're wanting a heavier hitter. Now let's talk about heavy hitting with a conical, okay? The weight of the round ball is not sufficient for deep penetration, and we don't really want it, okay, with a round ball. A round ball going through the air, think of like a golf ball, is fairly okay. It's not as aerodynamic as it could be, but upon impact, it being pure soft lead, it kind of mashes. And that lets it spread out a little bit, and that lets it act like you sliding into second base. It dumps energy very, very quickly. Well, if the target is I want it to hit and dump energy very quickly so that all of it stays in here, I don't want it to blow through and hit that pine tree over yonder, because that's just wasted energy. That's lost. It's got to stay in the target to be of any use to me. And so round ball is very useful for that. But what if I'm shooting something bigger and heavier, like a hog? 5, 6, 7, 800, 1,000 pounds is not out of the question in my South of a 1,000-pound animal. They've been shot down here quite often. I have personally seen hog that were in the 900-pound range easily, you know. Well, I need something for penetration. I've got to bust a skull. It stops being the shallow, now I need hit and go in to get to the important vitals, and that's where the conical comes in. Now, let's look at the design of this conical a second. Okay, the design of this conical is you have the top of it with a smaller shaft base. This reduced size fits into the chamber easy, and then the height from that line to the very top is about the size of a round ball when you'd load the round ball. That makes it very easy to load into these guns for clearance issues and etc., so that whenever I put it in, it does not give me clearance problems where it's dragging, or I can't get the rammer onto it, or I got to take the gun apart to make it happen. Okay, I want something I can load in the field, and this Kerr bullet does that. More importantly, the balance is the nose. If I drop this, it's going to turn in there and hit nose first. Balance is a big thing in projectiles, especially in modern bullets. If a modern bullet is not balanced correctly, it flies very erratically, okay, as that weight shifts in the air as it goes. If you've ever seen high-speed footage of something like a shotgun slug going there, and you watch that thing doing this as it's going, if the wad sticks to the back end of it, it is wild and radical. It's the same thing. As it's going through the air, you have the air force coming over it and wants to keep it like a kite, where that tail is in this wind, this shockwave wind column, as it's forming a shockwave like we think of a jet going through the air. So that point on the end of it acts like a ballistic point. It allows that shockwave to be more focused and better hold it in a V, as opposed to a flat base, which is very erratic going through the air because that pressure is shifting around on it. So the ballistics for long range, weight, ballistic will give you much longer range. Okay. Now, nobody's suggesting you try to take a deer with a cap and ball revolver at 100 yards. Forget it, guys. It would be a miracle to do it because of shot placement. Now, I have personally shot this cap and ball revolver, which is, again, it's my Uberti 1860 McCulloch Colt that's got the fluted chambers on it like the original did. And this one has proved to be very accurate. I've done all of my little accuracy steps to it that I've done in my regular videos, like making the notch to the front sight to make it better, and I've deepened the rear sight notch and squared it off so I can see it more clearly. And you saw how this is shooting these. Also, your rammer in the gun, on the Ubertis, they have the cone that allows that nose to fit up into it and keeps it from mashing it flat. I'm of two minds for that, to be honest with you. I have a Pieta that does not have that kind of rammer in it, and whenever it mashes it, it makes it blunt nose. Blunt nose is fantastic on soft skin game at close range because, again, the hit, I dump the energy in the target rather than penetration. But that would be more like a blunt hit, like we think of a 30-30 versus a 308. The 308 has a pointed bullet and is much better for long range. The 30-30 hits better at close range because that flat nose, it doesn't over penetrate. Okay? But the Kerr bullet seems to be a good combination of the two, as well as using a conical. Now, like I said earlier, this conical is 225 grains when cast from pure lead. A 45 ACP is usually a 230 grain. The size will be basically the same. So if the weight is the same, the size is the same, and they're moving at the same speed, somewhere around 800 feet per second, 850 or more, 45 ACP. Now the 45 ACP and that bullet right there kind of look a lot alike, don't they? This has been a proven man stopper for 100 years. On thin skin game, us, about this size chest capacity, which is about the size of my whitetails down here in Alabama, or the average hog. So if this does such a good job at penetrating everything with an old round nose, hardened point, this ought to do comparable. I expect this to outperform, but not by a lot over this. See? And so from that, I'm generating an idea for hunting. So, looking at your conicals, notice that this has grease grooves. It would be a good idea to coat these in some sort of lubricant. Now, the typical thing to do is set them in a shallow pan and then pour melted lubricant up to the top of that, let it cool, and then pull them out. Or just simply dip the bullets into, take a pair of tweezers or something, grip the bullet and dip the bases into a little bit of lube and set it to the side and let it cool. What I'm going to do to mine, because I find it's a lot less mess and seems to do just as well, to be honest, is I take liquid Alox sold by LeePrecision.com. I'll take a lunch size, quarter, whatever, Ziploc bag. I'll squeeze a dollop into it. I'll put the balls into it, and I'll sit there and just massage them and let them roll and roll and roll all over each other and coat the whole bullet. And then I'll dump them out onto a sheet of aluminum foil and let them sit for 24 hours, and they'll be dry. That will put a layer of coating all the way around where it doesn't oxidate, and it does act as a lubricant going down the bore. And I use this on round ball as well as my conicals. And these were given to me, or I would have, already done it. And when you look at my Johnson & Dow's, they're all coated, they're all brownish. That's why, because of that liquid Alox. Now, doing that, and then the next important thing is the lubrication. Now, I'm not saying you got to use this, but this is my gun butter. I coat the bore fairly heavily because there is so much friction by this bullet. Excuse me. There's so much friction by this bullet coming down that bore. I wanted a greased skid from rear to front. So I take a brush, dip it into it, and I run up and down the bore, and I want to look down that bore, and I want it greasy. Okay? Visibly greasy. Now, if you don't like that, a lot of people like to daub a little bit of grease on the top of the bullet. That works too. But I found what happens there is, in my mind, what's happening is you coat the front of it, it fires, that pressure hits and hits the forcing cone, and it squeezes the lube out between the cylinder gap, blowing everywhere by that gas, and very little makes it into the actual bore. I greased the bore so that this lands in that grease chute, and it goes through. After a full cylinder, 6, I take my bore brush, I run it up and down, greasy bore brush. I just dip it into the grease, run it up and down, and break up any foul and make sure everything's nice and slick. If it looks really dark, I'll put a patch on it, run it up and down one time, and then apply grease. And you saw the accuracy of it. That's the secret to accuracy with conicals, lubrication. Because there is so much friction as this is going down the bore. If it hits a dry patch and makes that little smear, then everyone from there after is going to go and it grows and grows and grows, and your accuracy goes. Because as that bullet's coming down the barrel, if this side right here grabs and makes it and bend just that little bit, it's not coming out in the bore straight. It's on an angle. And then it does this. That was the biggest problem with the Lee and the other ones, is they didn't have a properly designed like this. So that when you dropped it in and you rammed it, it wasn't coming out of the bore straight. And so we didn't get that great accuracy out of it. The Johnson & Dows and these Kerrs will come out accurately if you do your part in loading. Okay? Now, as I showed a minute ago, put it on half cock, put your powder in, and then I come over here and drop the ball in, just like that. Boom. And you see it drops down there flush. And that's what I want. I don't want it cocked, I want it flush. So when I rotate it underneath to ram it, like that, and that rammer comes down to engage it, I want it centered. Okay? Now, going to ram, which is no powder, so I'm not going to ram this. I use a rag. I put the butt against my chest, I grab a hold of the barrel, and I put a rag on that loading lever. That protects my hand. In the past, I have carried into the field a little piece of leather or something in my shooting kit for me to grab the end of that rammer with. A lot of times I'll put just a piece of like belt leather that's kind of bent, and I'll put a loop in it so I can put the loop over my finger so I can hook it over it and it protect my hand whenever I come down on the rammer. It's not bad, but at the same time, when you're trying to keep your hand from getting all chewed up by that Colt type loading latch up there, saves your hand some. So, in conclusion, for the percussion revolver class, conicals can be a very, very attractive idea for hunting. It puts the cap and ball revolver into the next level. The number one concern is accuracy. Can it shoot accurately in your gun? Okay. So, number one, lubrication is your friend. Number two, find a bullet that fits and works well with your gun. I had a Johnson & Dow. I did not have a Kerr, and someone sent me these and I've tried them. I will be getting me a Kerr mold because of this. But see if you got, ask around in your friends in your black powder group, say, hey, will you can I pay you or something? You give me 10 or 15 or 20. Give me 30 of them, let's say 50 of them if you got them. And let me try them out before I go invest so much money in a mold. And the mold could be like 70 bucks. And that's a lot of money. Yes, it is. But it saves you in the long run, because I guarantee you going to buy these would be ridiculous. So the thing to do is I can cast them myself. Now, I want to cast these out of very soft lead, pure lead. How do you know if lead is soft enough? Take your fingernail and bear down hard on it and scratch. And if you can leave a scratch in it, it's soft enough. That means your fingernail is harder. That tells you. It can have a little other stuff, but they perform better when they're dead soft. The softer they are, the better they perform, because they arbitrate and grip the rifling better. And on impact, they flatten out and do more of that, stopping on base. I want all that energy to stay in my target if I'm hunting. I don't want it to go through and hit that tree over yonder. I want it to stop in that target. Do all the damage right here, not over there. See? And so I want to get these to do it. And if I'm going to be shooting something big, I want something big to do the job. Hope you've enjoyed this, guys. Please leave any questions or comments below, and I'll be happy to answer you. Till next time, guys, I'm Blackie, wishing you safe journeys. Have a great day, guys.